My son sold my house. When I was in the hospital, now I prepare my revenge. The winter chill seemed to seep through the paper-thin walls of my rented apartment. I pulled the threadbare blanket tighter around my shoulders as I sat at the rickety kitchen table, staring at the stack of legal documents before me. 3 months ago, I'd been in a comfortable 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch on Maple Street. The house where I'd raised my children. The home where my late wife took her last breath. Now I was here, in this shabby 1-bedroom, on the edge of town, plotting something I never imagined I'd be capable of. My name is Harold Winters. I'm 72 years old, and my son has betrayed me in a way I still struggle to comprehend. It began with chest pains, sharp, insistent jabs that woke me in the middle of the night. I'd been putting off my checkups. After Eleanor died, I lost interest in maintaining my own health. What was the point? 50 years of marriage, and suddenly, I was alone. The house felt too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. But I loved that house. Every creaking floorboard, every faded wallpaper pattern, every scratch on the banister told a story of our life together. When the ambulance came, my son Michael was the first person I called. He lived just 20 minutes away with his wife, Vanessa, and their 2 children. I'd always been closer to my daughter, Sarah, but she lived across the country in Seattle. Michael arrived at the hospital shortly after I did, his face a mask of concern that I now recognize was entirely fabricated. "Don't worry about anything, Dad," he said, squeezing my hand as the doctors wheeled me toward the cardiac unit. "I'll take care of everything." I had no reason to doubt him. He was my son, after all. Eleanor and I had raised him to be responsible, caring, honest. Or so I thought. The heart attack was severe. I underwent emergency bypass surgery and spent 2 weeks in the hospital, followed by another 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility. During this time, Michael visited regularly, always bringing updates about the house. He was checking the mail, watering Eleanor's garden, making sure everything was in order. He even brought photo albums from the attic that we flipped through together, reminiscing about family vacations and Christmas mornings. "Remember that summer in Cape Cod?" he asked one afternoon, pointing to a faded photograph of himself at 10 years old, proudly holding up a striped base nearly as big as he was. "Your mother was so afraid you'd fall off that pier," I said, smiling at the memory. "But you were determined to catch something bigger than Sarah's fish." "Those were good times," Michael said, closing the album. There was something in his voice, a finality that I didn't recognize then but understand now. He was saying goodbye to the house, to the memories, to any semblance of being a decent son. It wasn't until I was discharged from rehab, expecting to return home, that I learned the truth. Michael pulled up to the facility in his sleek BMW, helped me into the passenger seat, and instead of turning left toward Maple Street, he turned right. "Where are we going?" I asked, confused. "Dad," he began, his voice careful, rehearsed. "There's something we need to discuss." He drove to a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town, the very apartment where I sit now, and parked in a visitor spot. "What is this place?" I asked, though a sickening feeling was already forming in the pit of my stomach. "Your new home," Michael said, not meeting my eyes. "I've moved some of your things here already." "What are you talking about?" "Take me to my house, Michael." That's when he told me. Using the power of attorney I'd granted him years ago, a document Eleanor had insisted we prepare just in case, he had sold my house, my home, the place where Eleanor and I had built our life together. "It was for the best, Dad," he explained, his voice taking on that patronizing tone adult children sometimes use with their aging parents. "The house was too big for you, too much maintenance. And with your medical bills—" "My medical bills are covered by insurance," I interrupted, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Not all of them," he countered. "And what about future care? You're not getting any younger, Dad. This way, there's a nest egg for whatever comes next. Where's the money from the sale? I demanded. It's being managed, he said vaguely. Invested. For your care. I later discovered through my own investigation that being managed meant being transferred into accounts that Michael controlled. Accounts I had no access to. He'd sold my house for $420,000, well below market value, I might add, to facilitate a quick sale, and I hadn't seen a penny of it. That first night in the apartment, after Michael left with promises to check in on me soon, I sat on the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room and wept for the first time since Eleanor died. I wept for the loss of my home, for the betrayal by my own flesh and blood, and for the realization that I was now truly alone. But grief, I've found, eventually gives way to other emotions. In my case, it gave way to a cold, calculated anger that has sustained me these past 3 months. An anger that has clarified my thinking and given me purpose. My daughter Sarah was horrified when I finally told her what had happened. She offered to let me move in with her in Seattle, but I declined. I had unfinished business here. Sarah promised to help however she could, though I've been careful not to tell her exactly what I'm planning. She's always been my moral compass, too much like her mother that way. She wouldn't approve of what I'm about to do. I've spent these months gathering information, consulting with a lawyer who specializes in elder fraud, paid for by selling my watch collection that Michael thankfully overlooked when clearing out the house, and meticulously documenting every aspect of Michael's deception. I've discovered that he's used some of the money to pay off his own debts, renovate his kitchen, and buy that new BMW. He's left me with just enough to subsist in this dreary apartment, doling out a monthly allowance from what should be my own money. But Michael made a crucial mistake. He underestimated me. He sees an old man, diminished by age and health problems. He doesn't see the former business executive who negotiated million-dollar deals, the man who built a company from the ground up before selling it to retire comfortably with Eleanor. He doesn't realize that his father still has some fight left in him. And so, I prepare. Each day, I add to my evidence file. Each night, I refine my plan. It's not just about the money, though I intend to recover every cent. It's about justice. It's about making sure Michael understands exactly what he's done, not just legally, but morally. He's betrayed not only me, but also the memory of his mother, who would be devastated to see what her son has become. My revenge won't be swift or violent. I'm not going to confront him with accusations or threats. No, what I have in mind is much more comprehensive. By the time I'm finished, Michael will have lost far more than a house. He'll have lost his reputation, his standing in the community, possibly his job, and, if I'm successful, his freedom. Elder fraud is a serious crime after all. But there's something else brewing inside me, something I'm almost ashamed to admit. A part of me wants Michael to suffer as I have suffered. To know what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust implicitly. To experience the humiliation of having your autonomy stripped away, of being treated as less than a competent adult. And I know exactly how to accomplish this. Through my lawyer, I've learned that Michael's business, a real estate development company he started 10 years ago, is heavily leveraged. He's overextended himself on a new project, counting on its success to keep the whole house of cards from collapsing. The project hinges on acquiring a key piece of property that would connect 2 parcels he already owns. What Michael doesn't know is that I've been in contact with the owner of that property. Through a series of shell companies set up by my lawyer, I'm now in a position to purchase the land myself, not to use, not to develop, but simply to hold, to prevent Michael from completing his project. Without it, his investors will pull out, his loans will be called in, and his business will crumble. Is it petty? Perhaps. Is it justified? Absolutely. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the property owner to finalize the deal. Michael will learn about it afterward. though he won't know I'm behind it. Not at first. That revelation will come later, at a moment of my choosing, when it will inflict maximum damage. As I sit here at my kitchen table, reviewing the contracts one last time, I feel a strange sense of calm. Eleanor wouldn't approve of what I'm doing. She always believed in turning the other cheek, in forgiveness as the path to peace. But Eleanor isn't here, and I'm not seeking peace. I'm seeking justice. The clock on the wall, one of the few personal items I managed to retrieve from my house, chimes 9 times. It's getting late, and tomorrow will be a busy day. I gather the documents into a folder and place it in my briefcase, then shuffle to the bedroom to prepare for sleep. As I lie in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, I think about the look that will cross Michael's face when he realizes what I've done, when he understands that his own father has orchestrated his downfall. Will there be shock? Anger? Perhaps even a flicker of respect for the old man he so gravely underestimated. I'll find out soon enough. For now, I need to rest. Revenge, especially at my age, requires stamina. And I'm just getting started. The morning dawned gray and drizzly, fitting my mood perfectly as I prepared for my meeting with James Harrington, the owner of the property that would be the linchpin in my plan. I dressed carefully in one of the few good suits Michael had deigned to bring to my new home, a charcoal gray Brooks Brothers that Eleanor had always said brought out the silver in my hair. My hands trembled slightly as I knotted my tie, though whether from anticipation or the medication I now took daily for my heart, I couldn't say. I studied my reflection in the bathroom mirror, the deep lines around my eyes, the sagging jowls, the thin lips pressed into a determined line. I hardly recognized myself anymore. Was this the face of a man plotting revenge against his own son? Apparently so. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. at Harrington's office downtown. My lawyer, Patricia Mendez, had arranged to pick me up at 9:30. Patricia was a formidable woman in her 50s who specialized in elder law and financial abuse cases. When I first went to her with my story, she'd listened with an expression of growing outrage. "What Michael has done is not just morally reprehensible, Mr. Winters," she'd told me. "It's criminal. Power of attorney doesn't give him the right to enrich himself at your expense." She'd taken my case with a ferocity that suggested she had personal experience with such matters, though she never said as much. Over the past 3 months, she'd become my ally, my advocate, and something close to a friend, the only person, besides Sarah, who knew the full extent of Michael's betrayal. At precisely 9:30, my phone rang. Patricia was outside waiting. I gathered my briefcase, took one last look around the apartment, still alien to me despite the few familiar possessions, scattered about, and headed out. Patricia's sleek silver Audi was idling by the curb. She got out to help me with the door, a courtesy I found both touching and mildly irritating. I wasn't completely infirm, despite what Michael seemed to think. "Good morning, Harold," she said, using my first name as I'd insisted upon after our initial meeting. "Ready for this?" "As I'll ever be," I replied, settling into the passenger seat. As we drove toward downtown, Patricia briefed me on what to expect. "James Harrington is a businessman. First and foremost," she explained. "He doesn't care who buys his property as long as the price is right. The shell company we've set up, Winter Solutions LLC, appears completely legitimate. There's no way for Michael to trace it back to you unless someone talks." "And no one will talk," I said, more statement than question. "No one will talk," she confirmed. "The only people who know the true ownership are you, me, and my paralegal, who's bound by confidentiality." The drive took less than 15 minutes, but it felt like hours as my mind churned with doubt and determination in equal measure. Was I really going through with this? Using nearly all of my remaining savings, the money Michael hadn't yet gotten his hands on, to buy a property for no other reason than to thwart my son's business dealings. The old Harold, the pre-betrayal Harold, would never have considered such a thing. But I wasn't that man anymore. Harrington's office was in one of the newer buildings downtown, all glass and steel and self-importance. His receptionist, young, blonde, efficiently polite, escorted us to a conference room where Harrington himself was waiting. James Harrington was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with the tanned, lean look of someone who spent his weekends on a golf course. He rose to shake our hands as we entered. "Mr. Smith, Ms. Mendez," he said, using the alias we'd established for me in this transaction. "Please have a seat." We settled around the conference table, exchanged the usual pleasantries about the weather and traffic, and then got down to business. "I've reviewed the offer from Winter Solutions," Harrington began, tapping a folder in front of him. "It's generous, I'll grant you that. But I'm curious, what exactly are your plans for the property? It's oddly shaped, landlocked on two sides, not particularly useful without the adjacent parcels." Patricia answered smoothly before I could speak. "Our client has long-term development interests in the area. This acquisition is part of a larger strategic plan." Harrington nodded, though his eyes, shrewd, assessing, suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "I should mention that I've received another offer for the property. Just yesterday, in fact." My heart skipped a beat. "From whom?" I asked, forgetting momentarily that I was supposed to be Richard Smith, disinterested investor, not Harold Winters, vengeful father. "Winters Development," Harrington replied, watching me closely. "Local company. The owner seems quite eager to acquire the parcel, offered to match any competing bid." Michael. Of course. He must have gotten wind that someone else was interested in the property. Patricia placed a hand on my arm, a gentle warning to let her handle this. "Our offer stands as is, Mr. Harrington," she said calmly. "And as you noted, it's generous. 15% above market value. We're prepared to close immediately, with no contingencies. Can Winters Development say the same?" Harrington leaned back in his chair, considering. "They requested a week to secure financing," he admitted. "So they don't actually have the money in hand?" Patricia pressed. "Apparently not." She smiled, thinly. "We do." The next hour was spent reviewing the contract, initialing pages, and finalizing the details of the transaction. By 11:30, it was done. I had purchased the property for $1.2 million, nearly all of my remaining liquid assets, and effectively blocked Michael's expansion plans. As we left Harrington's office, I felt strangely hollow. This was just the first step in my plan, yet I'd expected to feel some sense of triumph, some vindication. Instead, I felt only a dull ache, like pressing on a bruise. "You did well in—" "There, Harold," Patricia said as we stepped into the elevator. Harrington had no idea he was dealing with someone personally invested in the outcome. "When will Michael find out?" I asked. Harrington said he'd be notifying the other interested parties this afternoon, so soon. She studied my face. "Having second thoughts?" I shook my head. "No, but I thought I'd feel something more." Patricia's expression softened. "Revenge isn't as satisfying as we hope it will be, Harold. Trust me on this. But justice is necessary." "This isn't just about justice," I admitted as the elevator doors opened to the lobby. "I want him to hurt like I've hurt." "I know," she said simply, "and he will." Back in Patricia's car, as we pulled away from the curb, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Patricia glanced at me. "Sooner than expected," she murmured. "You don't have to answer." But I did. I needed to hear his voice when the first piece of my plan fell into place. "Hello, Michael," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Dad, hey." He sounded distracted, a slight edge to his voice. How are you feeling today? About the same, I replied, playing the role of the frail old man he believed me to be. The new medication makes me tired. Right. Listen, I can't talk long. Something's come up with work. I just wanted to check in. Problems? I asked innocently. There was a pause, then a forced laugh. Nothing I can't handle, just a small setback with a property acquisition. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it, at least a little. Despite everything, there was a part of me, a small, stubbornly paternal part, that still cared about my son's well-being. Yeah, well, these things happen in real estate. Someone swooped in with a cash offer on a piece I needed. Another pause. Actually, Dad, that reminds me. Have you given any more thought to what we discussed about investing some of your house money in my business? The audacity of it, asking me to invest the money he'd effectively stolen from me into his failing business, nearly took my breath away. I thought you said that money was being managed for my care, I said carefully. It is, he backpedaled, quickly. But a portion of it could be working harder for you. My new development has a projected return of 15% in the first year alone. The development you just had a setback with? He paused, and I could almost hear him recalibrating his approach. That's just a temporary issue. I have other options. I see. I let a note of weariness creep into my voice. Well, I'm rather tired now, Michael. Perhaps we could discuss this another time. Sure, Dad, of course. Why don't I come by this weekend? We can talk more then. That would be nice, I lied. Give my best to Vanessa and the kids. I ended the call and looked over at Patricia, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with undisguised interest. He's already feeling the pressure, I said, a grim satisfaction finally beginning to take root. And he had the nerve to ask me to invest in his business. Patricia shook her head in disgust. Using your money to bail himself out. The man has no shame. No, I agreed, but he will have regret. That I promise you. As we drove back to my apartment, I thought about the next phase of my plan. Blocking the property acquisition was just the opening move. The real damage would come from the legal proceedings Patricia was preparing. Charges of financial elder abuse, fraud, and misuse of fiduciary responsibility. We had the documentation, the evidence of improper fund transfers, the below-market sale of my house. But there was something else I needed, before we filed those charges. Something personal that would hurt Michael far more than any legal penalty. I needed the truth. I needed to hear from his own lips why he had done this. Was it simple greed? Had he always resented me? Was there something in our past, some perceived slight or failure on my part as a father, that had festered into this betrayal? Whatever his reasons, I wanted him to say them to my face. No excuses, no justifications, just the raw, honest truth. And I knew exactly how to get it. This weekend, when he came to discuss investing my money in his business, I would be ready. The apartment would be wired for sound and video, another service Patricia had arranged through a private investigator. Every word, every expression would be captured as evidence. And then, only then, would I reveal what I knew, what I had done, what was still to come. As Patricia pulled up to my apartment building, she turned to me with concern in her eyes. Are you sure you want to go through with the next part, Harold? It's going to be difficult. I nodded slowly. I need to know why, Patricia. Before we file the charges, before his life falls apart, I need to understand why my son became someone capable of this. She reached over and squeezed my hand gently. Just remember, whatever his reasons, they don't justify what he did to you. I know, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Part of me, the part that remembered Michael as a little boy, wide-eyed and trusting, clutching my hand as we walked through the park, still searched for explanations, for mitigating factors. But that part was growing smaller every day, crowded out by the cold determination that now drove me forward. "I'll see you Friday afternoon to set up the recording equipment," Patricia said as I got out of the car. I nodded, closed the door, and watched her drive away before turning to face the building I still couldn't bring myself to call home. 3 days until Michael's visit. 3 days to prepare myself for a confrontation that would irrevocably change both our lives. The weight of what I was doing, the deliberate, methodical destruction of my son's life and livelihood, settled heavily on my shoulders as I climbed the stairs to my apartment. Was it worth it? Was revenge ever truly worth the cost? I didn't. No. But I was committed now, too far along this path to turn back. Besides, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, "He started this. I'm merely finishing it." With that cold comfort, I unlocked my door and stepped inside, already rehearsing in my mind the questions I would ask when I finally faced my son with the truth of what he'd done, and what I had done in return. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Patricia arrived Friday afternoon with a technician who discreetly installed small cameras and microphones throughout my apartment's living room and kitchen. They were nearly invisible, tiny lenses hidden in clock faces, air vents, even the spine of a book on the shelf. The audio equipment was similarly concealed. "We'll be able to hear and see everything," the technician assured me as he demonstrated the system on a tablet he'd brought. "The feed will be recorded locally on this device, which I'll hide in your bedroom, and backed up to a secure cloud server." Patricia added, "Remember, Harold, for this to be admissible if we need it later, you must clearly establish that Michael is there of his own free will, and you can't entrap him. Don't lead him into making admissions." "I understand," I said, though my legal knowledge was limited to what I'd absorbed from decades of crime dramas on television. "I just want him to tell me why." After the technician left, Patricia stayed for a cup of tea. She seemed concerned about my state of mind, repeatedly asking if I was sure I wanted to go through with this. "It's not too late to take a different approach," she suggested gently. "We have enough evidence already to file charges." I shook my head. "I need to do this my way." She didn't argue further, just reminded me that she would be monitoring the feed remotely and would have emergency services on standby, just in case. "In case of what?" I asked. Patricia hesitated. "In case things become heated. Michael won't be happy when he realizes what you've done with the property. And when people are cornered, they can become unpredictable." The implication that my son might physically harm me should have been shocking. But after what he'd already done, I found I couldn't dismiss the possibility entirely. "I'll be careful," I promised. Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Michael had texted the night before to confirm he'd be coming at 2 p.m. I spent the morning puttering around the apartment, straightening things that didn't need straightening, checking and rechecking that the recording equipment was functioning properly. At 1:30, I received a text from Patricia. "Systems all online, I'll be watching. Be safe." At 1:58, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the complex's parking lot. From my window, I saw Michael's BMW gliding into a visitor spot. He sat in the car for a moment, tapping at his phone, before finally getting out and heading toward the building. I moved to the center of the living room, took a deep breath, and prepared to face my son. The knock came at precisely 2 p.m. Michael had always been punctual, one of the few traits he seemed to have inherited from me. I opened the door to find him standing there in casual weekend attire. Designer jeans, a light blue button-down with the sleeves rolled up, loafers without socks. He looked tired, I noticed, with slight shadows under his eyes and a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen him. "Dad," he said, leaning in for our customary brief hug. "How are you feeling?" "Well enough," I replied, stepping back to let him in. "Come in. Come in." He entered the apartment, his eyes darting around in a way that suggested he was cataloging potential assets rather than admiring my living space. "Can I get you something to drink?" I offered. "Water? Coffee? I might have a beer in the fridge." "Just water is fine," he said, settling onto the couch, directly in the line of sight of one of the hidden cameras, I noted with satisfaction. I went to the kitchen, filled 2 glasses with water, and returned to find Michael scrolling through his phone. He quickly put it away as I approached. "Sorry," he said with a tight smile. "Work never stops, you know." "I remember," I said, handing him a glass and taking a seat in the armchair opposite him. Though in my day, we didn't have those things following us everywhere. Michael smiled indulgently at what he clearly considered old man grumbling. "How's the new medication working out? You said it was making you tired?" "Among other things," I said vaguely. "But that's not what you came to talk about, is it?" He took a sip of water, setting the glass down carefully on a coaster. "I was thinking more about what we discussed, about investing some of your money in my development project." I nodded slowly. "Yes, you mentioned that. The one with the recent setback, if I recall correctly." A flash of irritation crossed his face before he smoothed it away. "That's being resolved. These things happen in real estate development. The point is, this is a solid opportunity for you to grow your nest egg." "My nest egg," I repeated. "You mean the money from selling my house?" "Dad," he sighed, leaning forward. "We've been over this. The house was too much for you to manage alone. The proceeds from the sale are being invested for your long-term care. This would just be a portion of that, put to work in a more aggressive growth vehicle." "And how much would this aggressive growth vehicle require?" He hesitated, then said, "I was thinking around 200,000. Nearly half of what he'd gotten for my house." I had to admire his audacity. "That's a substantial amount," I observed mildly. "What exactly is this development project?" Michael's face lit up at the chance to talk about his business, his passion. He launched into a detailed explanation of a mixed-use development he was planning. Retail on the ground floor, luxury condos above, in an up-and-coming area of town. "The key is assembling all the necessary parcels," he explained, his hands moving animatedly as he spoke. "I've already secured most of them, but there's one piece, a weird triangular lot, that's essential for the site plan to work. I had it all but locked up when some out-of-town investor swooped in with a cash offer." "That sounds frustrating," I said, watching his face carefully. "It's a temporary setback," he insisted. "I'm already exploring other options. But if I had additional capital now, I could make a counteroffer the seller couldn't refuse. And this investor, do you know who it is?" Michael shook his head. "Some LLC, Winter Solutions or something like that. Probably a tax shelter for some rich guy who won't even develop the land. Just sit on it until someone pays them double." He frowned. "The whole thing stinks of speculation." I took a slow sip of water, considering my next words carefully. This was the moment to start leading him toward the truth. "You know, Michael, it's interesting you should mention that property," I said finally. "I've been doing some research of my own lately." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Research? Into what?" "Real estate, primarily. Legal structures, financial matters." I set my glass down with deliberate precision. "Did you know that power of attorney is not the same as guardianship? It doesn't give you the right to make decisions about where I live or how my assets are managed unless I'm declared incompetent by a court." Michael's expression shifted, a flicker of unease passing across his features before settling into something more controlled. "Dad, what's this about? I'm just trying to help you secure your future." "Are you?" I asked quietly. "Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been helping yourself to my present." A flush crept up his neck. "If this is about the house again." "It's about a lot more than the house," I interrupted. It's about the $420,000 you got for it. Well below market value, I might add. It's about the new BMW you're driving, the kitchen renovation Vanessa has been posting about. On Facebook, the debts you've suddenly paid off. It's about you using my money. Money you had no right to touch, to solve your financial problems. Michael's face had gone pale, then red, then settled into a rigid mask. You don't understand the situation, he said, his voice tight. I've been managing your affairs because you're not capable of doing it yourself anymore. Not capable? I repeated, feeling anger rising in my chest. I had a heart attack, Michael. I didn't lose my mind. You're 72 years old, Dad. You were living alone in a house too big for you to maintain, ignoring your health, letting things fall apart around you. Someone had to step in. And that someone decided to sell my house out from under me? To put me in this, I gestured around the shabby apartment, while pocketing the difference? I didn't pocket anything, he snapped. I invested it. For your future care. Show me, I demanded. Show me these investments. Show me the accounts. Show me where my money is right now. He shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated. There are several different vehicles, tax considerations. In other words, you can't, I said flatly. Because the money isn't in investments for my care. It's in your pocket, your house, your car, your failing business. Michael stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. My business is not failing, he said through gritted teeth. No? Then why are you so desperate for that triangular parcel? Why did you come here asking for $200,000 of my money? He stopped pacing, staring at me with narrowed eyes. How do you know about the parcel? I never described its shape to you. It was a slip, a small one, but potentially revealing. I needed to be careful now. You just did, I said, calmly. You called it weird and triangular when you were explaining your project. He continued to stare at me, suspicion darkening his features. Something's going on here. Have you been talking to someone about me, about my business? I've been talking to a lot of people, I admitted. Lawyers primarily, about financial elder abuse, fraud, misuse of power of attorney. Interesting topics. Lawyers, he repeated, his voice flat. You're threatening to sue me, your own son? I'm not threatening anything, I said. I'm simply stating facts. You sold my house without my knowledge or consent. You took the money and used it for your own purposes. You moved me into this apartment and have been doling out a pitiful allowance from what should be my own funds. These are facts, Michael. What would you call that? He ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling to control his temper. I'd call it taking care of my father when he couldn't take care of himself. Making hard decisions that needed to be made. Decisions that conveniently solved your financial problems at the same time? My finances are none of your business, he snapped. They are when you're using my money to fix them, I countered. We stared at each other across the room, the tension between us thick enough to cut. This was it, the moment of truth I'd been waiting for. But instead of satisfaction, I felt only a profound sadness. A more focused approach might be the key to survival. Thank you, I said, feeling genuinely grateful. I needed this reminder of why we're doing this in the first place. That's what co-founders are for, she smiled. Now go home and get some sleep. Tomorrow, we'll talk to Marcus and Daniel about refocusing our efforts on the soil health technology as our initial market entry. As I drove home that night, my father's skepticism seemed less intimidating. Yes, we faced enormous challenges. Yes, we might still fail, but we were creating something real, something with the potential to make a meaningful difference. That was worth fighting for, regardless of the outcome. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with the team. I was honest about our financial situation and proposed the new strategy Sophia and I had discussed. Focus primarily on the soil health monitoring system as our first product. while continuing development of the robotics and data platform at a reduced pace. To my relief, both Marcus and Daniel saw the logic in this approach. The sensors provide immediate value to farmers, Daniel noted, and the data we collect from early adopters will help refine my models for the full platform. Marcus was more reluctant but pragmatic. I don't like slowing down the robotics work, but I understand the constraints. And I can use this time to improve the designs based on what we learn from the soil sensor deployments. With our new strategy in place, we redoubled our efforts. Sophia worked tirelessly to refine her sensor technology and document the results of her soil regeneration experiments. Daniel shifted his focus to creating a simplified version of his data platform that could work specifically with the soil sensors, providing actionable insights to farmers in real time. Marcus reluctantly scaled back his robotics work, but used the opportunity to design simpler, more cost-effective implements that could integrate with existing farm equipment rather than replacing it entirely. I focused on refining our business pitch and seeking additional funding sources. Dr. Michaels came through with introductions to several potential investors who specialized in agricultural technology. Armed with Sophia's compelling experimental results, we prepared for a new round of pitches. Chapter 5. The Art of Persistence. No. The word hung in the air of the sleek conference room. Martin Grayson, managing partner at Agro Ventures Capital, closed the portfolio folder I had given him and slid it back across the polished table. The soil sensor market is already crowded, he continued. What you're proposing isn't sufficiently differentiated to justify the valuation you're seeking. This was our third investor meeting of the week and the third rejection. Each had come with different reasoning, but the outcome was the same. No one was willing to bet on Terra Nova Systems just yet. With respect, Mr. Grayson, I said, fighting. To keep my voice steady, our sensors measure microbial activity and carbon sequestration in ways existing products don't, and they're just the entry point for our integrated system that will. He held up a hand. I understand your vision, Mr. Wakefield. It's ambitious. But my firm invests in proven technologies with clear paths to market, not integrated systems, that might someday transform agriculture if everything goes perfectly. He stood up, signaling that our meeting was over. Come back when you have customers and revenue, then we can talk. Outside on the street, Sophia and I walked in silence for a block before she spoke. That was brutal. And familiar, I said. We've heard some version of that from every investor we've approached. So what now? We've got about 6 weeks of runway left, by my calculation. I stopped walking and turned to face her. We need to change our approach. Investors want to see customer validation, so let's give them that. How? We don't have a finished product yet. We have functioning prototypes of the soil sensors and a basic version of the data platform. What if we offered them to a few farmers for free as part of a pilot program? We'd get valuable feedback and, assuming the results are positive, testimonials we could use with investors. Sophia considered this. It could work. But who would take a chance on unproven technology from a startup that might not exist in 2 months? I smiled for the first time that day. I have an idea about that. That evening, I made a call I'd been avoiding for months. Alex? My mother sounded surprised to hear from me. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Mom. I actually called to ask for Uncle Peter's phone number. Peter? Why do you need to speak with him? Uncle Peter wasn't really my uncle, but my father's college roommate and the owner of a mid-sized organic farm in western Massachusetts. He had always been the black sheep in my father's social circle, choosing agriculture over a more lucrative career in finance or law. My father tolerated him with a mixture of amusement and condescension, often referring to Peter's farm as his hobby. I want to talk to him about possibly testing some of our technology on his farm. There was a pause. Your father won't like that. I'm not asking for Dad's permission, Mom. I'm asking for Peter's phone number. She sighed. He's going to find out, you know. Probably, but this is important. Another pause, then. I'll text it to you. And Alex? I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Mom. So do I. Uncle Peter turned out to be surprisingly receptive to my proposal. He invited me to visit his farm the following weekend to discuss the details in person. Waking Roots Farm sprawled across 200 acres of rolling hills. Unlike the vast monoculture fields that dominated industrial agriculture, Peter's land was a patchwork of diverse crops, orchards, pastures, and wooded areas. It was exactly the kind of operation that could benefit from our integrated approach to regenerative farming. Peter greeted me with a bear hug when I arrived. Alex Wakefield, look at you, all grown up and starting a company. Your father must be proud. I winced. Not exactly. He thinks I'm wasting my time and money. Peter laughed. That sounds like Charles. Never could see beyond the next quarterly report. He gestured toward the fields. Come on, let me show you around while you tell me about this technology of yours. For the next 2 hours, we walked the farm as I explained Terra Nova's vision and our current focus on soil health monitoring. Peter asked insightful questions about the sensor's durability, power requirements, and data accuracy. By the time we reached the farmhouse for lunch, I could tell he was genuinely interested. So, I said as we sat down to eat, would you be willing to participate in our pilot program? We'd install the sensors across selected fields, provide you with access to the data platform, and use your feedback to refine the system. Peter spread homemade jam on a slice of bread. What's in it for me, besides helping my best friends? Wayward son? Valuable data about your soil health that you wouldn't otherwise have. Early access to technology that could eventually save you money on inputs while improving yields. And the satisfaction of supporting innovation in regenerative agriculture. He smiled. You've got a bit of your father's salesmanship in you, though I suspect you wouldn't appreciate the comparison. I've learned from watching him, even if I'm applying those lessons differently. Peter nodded thoughtfully. I'll do it, but on one condition. I want you to include at least 2 other farms in your pilot. Farms that are transitioning from conventional to organic practices. That's where your technology could make the biggest difference, helping farmers through that difficult transition, period when yields often drop before the soil recovers. It was a brilliant suggestion, and exactly the kind of thinking we needed. Do you have specific farms in mind? As a matter of fact, I do. I mentor several farmers who are making that transition. 2 of them would be perfect for this pilot. By the end of the day, we had a verbal agreement for a 3-farm pilot program. Peter would make the introductions to the other farmers, and we would begin installations within 2 weeks. The mood at Terra Nova headquarters was electric when I returned with the news. For the first time in months, we had a clear path forward. That didn't depend on convincing skeptical investors. We had real-world testing sites where we could prove the value of our technology. The next 2 weeks were a frenzy of preparation. Sophia fine-tuned the sensors to ensure they would perform reliably in field conditions. Daniel optimized the data platform for the specific soil types and crop varieties at our pilot farms. Marcus, though still focused primarily on his robotics work, helped design rugged housings for the sensors that could withstand weather, wildlife, and farm equipment. Our financial situation remained precarious, but the pilot program gave us a renewed sense of purpose. We were no longer just building technology in isolation. We were creating solutions for specific farmers with real challenges. The installation days were both exhausting and exhilarating. At each farm, we carefully placed sensors across test fields, mapping their locations precisely and establishing baseline readings. We trained the farmers on how to access and interpret the data through a simple web interface Daniel had designed. Peter's farm was our flagship site, with the most extensive sensor network and the most comprehensive data collection. The other 2 farms, Riverbend Farm and Sunrise Fields, were smaller operations in the midst of transitioning from conventional to organic practices. Their owners, Maria Gonzalez and Tom Bradford, were cautiously optimistic about our technology. but understandably concerned about risking their livelihoods on unproven solutions. "I'm taking a big chance here," Maria told me as we installed sensors in her vegetable fields. "We're in year 2 of transition, and our yields are down nearly 30% from when we were conventional. My profit margins are razor thin. If your system doesn't help us make better decisions, I'm not sure we'll survive another year." Her words were a sobering reminder of the real stakes involved. This wasn't just about proving our technology to investors. It was about creating tools that could help farmers succeed economically while adopting more sustainable practices. "I understand," I told her. "That's why we're not charging you for this pilot. We want to prove that this works before we ask anyone to pay for it." "I appreciate that," she said, "but my time is valuable too. Learning a new system, monitoring the data, that's an investment on my part." "You're absolutely right. And I promise you, if you don't see value from this system within 3 months, we'll remove the equipment and stop taking up your time." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Let's see what your fancy sensors can tell me about my soil that my own eyes and hands can't." It was the kind of challenge we needed. Practical, grounded, and focused on delivering real value rather than just impressive technology. As we drove away from Maria's farm after completing the installation, I felt a new sense of responsibility. We weren't just building a company anymore. We were working to earn the trust of farmers who were taking significant risks to change how they grew food. Back at our headquarters, we established a new routine. Each morning began with a review of the data coming in from our pilot sites. We analyzed soil moisture levels, temperature fluctuations, microbial activity, and nutrient cycling, looking for patterns and insights that could help our farmers make better decisions. When we spotted something significant, we would call the relevant farmer immediately. "Maria, your field 3 is showing signs of nitrogen stress. You might want to apply a targeted dose of organic fertilizer before the weekend." Or, "Tom, the moisture levels in your western field are higher than optimal. You might want to hold off on irrigation for a few days." At first, the farmers were skeptical of these recommendations, but as they saw the positive results, healthier plants, reduced input costs, fewer pest problems, their skepticism gradually gave way to cautious appreciation. 6 weeks into the pilot, Peter called me with exciting news. "Your sensors picked up a fungal pathogen in my apple orchard before there were any visible symptoms. We were able to apply a preventative organic treatment that stopped it from spreading. Without that early warning, I might have lost a significant portion of my crop." It was exactly the kind of success story we needed. I asked Peter if he would be willing to provide a testimonial we could use with investors, and he readily agreed. The following week, Tom reported that the sensor data had helped him reduce his water usage by 20% while maintaining yield, and Maria noted that following our targeted fertilization recommendations had improved plant health in her problem areas. Armed with these early successes, we refined our investor pitch. Instead of leading with our grand vision of an integrated system, we focused on the concrete results from our pilot program: early detection of plant diseases, optimization of water and fertilizer use, and improved decision-making for farmers. In transition to organic practices, we positioned the soil health monitoring system as a standalone product with immediate value, while presenting the robotics and comprehensive data platform as future expansions that would build on this foundation. Dr. Michaels arranged a new round of meetings with potential investors, including some who had previously rejected us. The difference in their reception was dramatic. "These results from real farms are compelling," said Jennifer Wu of Greenseed Ventures during our third meeting of the week. "You've demonstrated that your technology addresses specific pain points for farmers, not just abstract environmental benefits." "That's been our focus," I agreed. "Finding the intersection where environmental improvements also make economic sense for the farmer." "And your customer acquisition strategy?" she asked. "We're targeting farms in transition to organic or regenerative practices first. These operations face the greatest challenges during the transition period, when yields often decrease before the soil recovers. Our system helps them navigate that difficult phase more successfully, making the economics of transition more viable. She nodded approvingly. Smart. You're going after the customers with the most acute need. What about pricing? Subscription model. Farmers pay an annual fee based on acreage, which includes the sensors, access to the data platform, and regular expert consultation on interpreting the results. We've structured it so that the cost is offset by savings in water, fertilizer, and reduced crop losses. Jennifer exchanged glances with her colleague. We'd like to continue this conversation. Can you send us your financial projections and a more detailed technical overview? It wasn't a commitment, but it was far more positive than any investor response we'd received previously. Similar reactions came from several other firms we met with that week. By month's end, we had 3 tentative offers of investment, each with different terms and expectations. It was a far cry from the desperate situation we'd faced just 2 months earlier when our funds were nearly depleted. The team gathered in our conference room to discuss the offers. Greenseed Ventures is offering the best terms, I explained. They're willing to invest $1.5 million for a 20% stake, which values Terra Nova at $7.5 million pre-money. That seems low given our progress, Marcus objected. It's actually quite generous for our stage, Daniel countered. Most ag-tech startups at our phase would be valued around $5 million, especially with limited revenue. What about the other offers? Sophia asked. Agro Innovation Fund is offering $2 million for 30%, and Tech Harvest Partners wants $1 million for 15%, but with more restrictive terms regarding future fundraising. We debated the options for hours, weighing the financial terms against the strategic value each investor could bring. Greenseed had the strongest network in sustainable agriculture. Agro Innovation had deep pockets for future rounds. Tech Harvest had the best technical expertise that could help us refine our products. In the end, we decided to go with Greenseed Ventures. Their focus on environmental sustainability aligned with our mission, and they seemed to truly understand the transformative potential of our approach. The day we signed the term sheet, the team celebrated with champagne and plastic cups at our leaky warehouse. To Terra Nova Systems, I toasted, raising my cup. And to proving that doing good for the planet can also be good business. To Terra Nova, they echoed. As we drank, I couldn't help thinking of my father. I had spent the last 8 months trying to prove him wrong, to show that my naive dream was viable. Now, we had validation from both customers and investors. Would that be enough to change his mind? I pushed the thought away. This moment wasn't about my father. It was about what we were building together. Whatever his opinion, Terra Nova had taken its first significant step toward sustainability, both environmental and financial. Chapter 6. The Competition. The investment from Greenseed Ventures changed everything for Terra Nova. We moved from our leaky warehouse to a proper office and lab space in Cambridge. We hired our first employees beyond the founding team, 2 engineers to help Marcus with the robotics development, a soil scientist to work with Sophia on expanding the sensor capabilities, and a marketing specialist to help us refine our messaging to farmers. With the financial pressure temporarily relieved, we could focus on improving our products and expanding our customer base. The soil health monitoring system, now branded as TerraSense, moved from pilot to commercial release 6 months after our funding round. Our first paying customers came from the network of farmers that Peter had introduced us to, other organic and transitioning operations that had heard about the results from our pilot program. Word spread through agricultural conferences, online forums, and, most importantly, farmer-to-farmer recommendations. By the end of our first year in business, TerraSense was installed on 27 farms across New England and the Mid-Atlantic, generating modest but growing subscription revenue. The feedback from these early customers helped us continuously improve both the hardware and software components of the system. We were still far from profitable, but the trajectory was promising. Daniel's data platform was becoming increasingly sophisticated as it ingested more information from diverse farming operations. Sophia's sensor technology was proving reliable in various soil types and weather conditions. And Marcus had completed early prototypes of robotic implements designed to work with the TerraSense system, particularly for precision application of organic amendments based on the sensor data. It was at the National Sustainable Agriculture Conference in Chicago that we first encountered serious competition. I was staffing our modest booth, explaining the TerraSense system to an interested farmer from Iowa, when I noticed a much larger display across the exhibition hall. The sleek black booth with glowing green accents featured the logo of Agricore Technologies, one of the largest agricultural equipment manufacturers in the country. What caught my attention wasn't the booth itself, but the products they were showcasing: soil sensors that looked remarkably similar to our designs, paired with a data platform that promised many of the same benefits as TerraSense. After my conversation with the farmer concluded, I wandered over to the Agricore booth, trying to appear casual as I examined their offering. "Can I help you?" asked a polished representative in a company polo shirt. "Just curious about your soil monitoring system," I said. "It's new, isn't it? I don't recall seeing it at last year's conference." "Our eco-soil system is making its debut here, actually," he said with practiced enthusiasm. "It represents Agricore's commitment to sustainable farming practices. The sensors measure microbial activity, carbon sequestration, and nutrient cycling in real time, allowing farmers to make data-driven decisions that improve soil health while maintaining profitability." It was almost word for word our own marketing language. I struggled to keep my expression neutral. "Interesting. And how long has this been in development?" "Agricore has been researching regenerative agricultural technologies for several years," he replied smoothly. "The eco-soil system is the culmination of that investment, combining our expertise in farm equipment with cutting-edge soil science." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further, and moved away from the booth. My mind was racing. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Agricore had clearly accelerated development of a competing product after seeing the interest in our approach. Back at our hotel that evening, I called an emergency meeting with Sophia and Daniel, who had also attended the conference. "They've copied us," I said without preamble, pacing the small hotel room. "Agricore's new system is basically TerraSense with a bigger marketing budget." Sophia frowned. "How similar is it?" "Too similar to be a coincidence. The sensors appear to use the same basic technology as ours, though I couldn't examine them closely enough to know if they've made any significant improvements. The data visualization on their platform looks nearly identical to our interface." Daniel's expression was grim. "This is bad timing. We're just starting to gain traction, and now a major player enters with what sounds like a comparable product. Do we have any recourse?" Sophia asked. "Patents or other IP protection?" I shook my head. "We have patent applications pending, but they're still under review, and even if they were granted, litigation against a company Agricore's size would be prohibitively expensive." "So what do we do?" I stopped pacing and sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "We need to accelerate our development roadmap. If we can't prevent them from copying what we've already built, we need to stay ahead by moving faster toward the integrated system. The soil sensors were always just the first component. Our advantage is that we've been working on the full vision from the beginning." Daniel looked skeptical. "Accelerating development requires more engineers, more testing, more of everything, including money. We'd need to raise another round sooner than planned." "Then that's what we'll do," I said firmly. "But first, I want to learn more about Agricore's system. We need to understand exactly what we're up against." The next day, I returned to Agricore's booth with a specific mission. This time, I presented myself as a farmer interested in the BAE eco-soil system, asking detailed technical questions and requesting a full demonstration. The more I learned, the more concerned I became. Their system was indeed remarkably similar to ours in functionality, though their sensors appeared slightly less sensitive to certain microbial markers that Sophia had identified as particularly important. Their data platform was polished, but lacked some of the predictive capabilities that Daniel had built into ours. However, Agricor had two significant advantages: an established distribution network through their existing dealer relationships, and the financial resources to offer the system at a price point that would be difficult for us to match while maintaining margins. As I walked away from their booth, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We should talk. Meet me at the Starbucks across from the convention center at 4 p.m. James Chen, Agricor R&D. I stared at the message in surprise. James Chen was Agricor's Director of Research and Development, according to their website. Why would he want to meet with me? Curiosity overcame caution, and at 4 p.m. I found myself sitting in the corner of the crowded Starbucks, watching the door. A few minutes later, a middle-aged Asian man in a well-tailored suit entered, scanned the room, and walked directly to my table. Alex Wakefield, James Chen. He offered his hand, which I shook automatically, still confused by this unexpected meeting. "How did you get my number?" I asked as he sat down. He smiled faintly. "Agricor has resources, but that's not important. What matters is that I wanted to speak with you directly, outside the corporate setting." "About what?" "About Terra Nova Systems and what Agricor's entry into your market means for your company." I stiffened. "If this is some kind of intimidation tactic?" "Not at all," he interrupted smoothly. "Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm here to discuss the possibility of acquisition." The word hung in the air between us. Acquisition. Agricor wanted to buy Terra Nova. "We're not for sale," I said automatically. "Everyone is for sale at the right price, Mr. Wakefield, and Agricor is prepared to be quite generous. Your technology is impressive, especially given your limited resources and time in the market. We believe it would complement our existing product lines very well." My mind raced through the implications. If Agricor bought Terra Nova, our technology would reach far more farms much faster than we could manage on our own. That would advance our environmental mission. But would Agricor maintain the regenerative philosophy at the core of our approach? Or would they extract the most commercially viable elements and discard the rest? "Why buy us when you've already copied our core technology?" I asked bluntly. Chen didn't flinch at the accusation. "Let's call it parallel development. But your team has expertise that would take us years to replicate internally, particularly in the integration of soil monitoring with robotics and predictive analytics. That's what interests us most. The full system you're working toward, not just the sensors you've commercialized so far." So they knew about our long-term roadmap, too. I wondered how much information had leaked from our investor presentations or customer discussions. "I appreciate your interest," I said carefully. "But Terra Nova isn't ready to consider acquisition offers at this stage. We've just begun to execute on our vision." Chen nodded as if he'd expected this response. "I understand, but the agricultural technology landscape is about to become much more competitive. Agricor will be investing heavily in this area. If not acquisition, perhaps we could discuss a strategic partnership. Access to our distribution network could accelerate your growth significantly." The offer was tempting, but I sensed a trap. A partnership with Agricor would make us dependent on their infrastructure and potentially limit our ability to pursue our more radical innovations. "I'll discuss it with my team," I said noncommittally. "But for now, I think we'll continue on our independent path." "As you wish." Chen stood and handed me his business card. "My direct line is on the back. When you're ready to have a more substantive conversation, call me directly. No need to go through corporate channels." After he left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, turning his card over in my hands. The meeting had clarified two things. Agricor saw us as enough of a threat to try to neutralize us through acquisition, and they were specifically interested in our integrated approach, not just the sensors they had already replicated. That gave us leverage, but also painted a target on our backs. If we rejected their overtures, they might use their vast resources to accelerate their own development of similar integrated systems, potentially rendering our technological lead temporary. When I returned to our booth, Sophia was waiting anxiously. "Where have you been? We have potential customers waiting to speak with you." "I just had a very interesting meeting with Agricor's R&D director," I said quietly. "I'll tell you all about it later. For now, let's focus on the farmers who are actually interested in what we're building." The rest of the conference passed in a blur of demonstrations, technical discussions, and networking. Despite the shadow cast by Agricor's competing product, we generated solid leads from farmers genuinely interested in TerraSense. Many were smaller operations that wouldn't typically be Agricor's target market, which suggested there might be room for both products in the diverse agricultural landscape. On the flight back to Boston, I finally had a chance to brief Sophia and Daniel fully on my meeting with James Chen. "Acquisition?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Already? We've barely gotten started." "It's a defensive move," Daniel said thoughtfully. "They see the potential threat we pose to their traditional business model. Better to absorb us than compete with us." "Exactly," I agreed. "And I think we should decline, at least for now. We have a unique vision that could be compromised under Agricor's ownership." "But their resources and reach?" Sophia mused. "We could potentially help many more farmers transition to regenerative practices if we had access to Agricor's distribution network." "At what cost, though?" I countered. "Would Agricor maintain our commitment to holistic, regenerative approaches? Or would they cherry-pick the most profitable elements and discard the rest? Remember, this is a company that has historically profited from industrial agriculture." The three of us debated the pros and cons throughout the flight. By the time we landed, we had reached a tentative consensus. We would continue independently for now, but remain open to potential partnerships that didn't compromise our core mission. Back at Terra Nova headquarters, we shared the news about Agricor's competing product with Marcus and the rest of the team. The reaction was a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to move faster," Marcus insisted. "My robotics team is ready to integrate more closely with the sensor network. We can demonstrate field applications that Agricor won't be able to match for at least a year." The emergence of a powerful competitor created a new urgency within Terra Nova. Our roadmap, which had been somewhat flexible, now had firm timelines and deliverables. We needed to showcase the advantages of our integrated approach before Agricor could close the gap. Over the next 3 months, we worked at a feverish pace. Sophia's team enhanced the sensitivity and durability of the TerraSense sensors. Daniel's group added new predictive models to the data platform that could forecast how different interventions would affect soil health over time. Marcus accelerated development of a lightweight robotic implement that could apply organic amendments with precision based on the sensor data. We also intensified our marketing efforts, emphasizing the aspects of our system that differentiated it from Agricor's offering, our focus on microbial health rather than just chemical composition, our predictive analytics that considered long-term soil regeneration, and our commitment to practices that sequestered carbon as a primary goal rather than an ancillary benefit. Our customer base continued to grow, though more slowly than before. Agricor's entry into the market. Some potential customers who might have chosen TerraSense now opted for the EcoSoil system, either because of brand familiarity or aggressive pricing. But we also found unexpected allies. Some of the more progressive farmers actively preferred to work with a smaller company dedicated exclusively to regenerative practices rather than a large corporation with a mixed environmental record. Environmental organizations began to recommend Terra Nova specifically in their sustainable farming guidance. 6 months after the conference, we were ready to unveil the next phase of our system. Terra Nova Precision, which combined the soil monitoring capabilities of TerraSense with Marcus's robotic implements to automatically apply organic amendments, compost teas, and beneficial microorganisms exactly where and when they were needed. We arranged for a demonstration day at Peter's farm, inviting current customers, prospective clients, agricultural journalists, and even representatives from various environmental NGOs. The event would showcase the integrated system in action, demonstrating how the sensors detected specific soil conditions and the robots responded with precise interventions. The day before the demonstration, I received another text from James. Chen, heard about your event tomorrow. Impressed by how quickly you've integrated the robotics. Our offer still stands. In fact, it's now more generous. I didn't respond. Chen's message only confirmed that we were on the right track. Agricor was watching us closely, which meant they recognized the value of what we were building. The demonstration day dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for an outdoor technology showcase. Peter's farm had been transformed with information stations, demonstration plots, and a central tent where Daniel's team had set up screens showing the data platform in action. As attendees arrived, I felt a surge of pride in what we had accomplished in just over a year and a half since Terra Nova's founding. From a leaky warehouse and desperate financial straits to this professional operation with growing customer validation, we had come further than even I had dared to hope. The demonstration itself went flawlessly. Sophia explained how the sensors detected a patch of soil with suboptimal fungal to bacterial ratio, a key indicator of soil health in regenerative systems. The data platform displayed this information in real time, and then the robotic implement moved precisely to the affected area, applying a carefully calibrated dose of fungally dominated compost tea. The farmers in attendance were visibly impressed, particularly when Peter shared data showing how his crop yields had improved since implementing our system, while his input costs had decreased significantly. The key difference between Terra Nova and other soil monitoring systems, I explained during my presentation, is that we're not just providing data, we're providing actionable intelligence and the means to act on it precisely. This closed-loop system constantly learns and adapts, becoming more effective over time as it gathers more data about your specific land. After the formal presentations, as attendees mingled and examined the equipment up close, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the gathering. My father, Charles Wakefield Sr., was watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. My first reaction was anger. Who had invited him? Was he here to gloat if something went wrong? But as our eyes met across the crowd, I realized that his presence might actually be an opportunity. Despite everything, a part of me still wanted him to understand what I was trying to build, not for his approval, necessarily, but for him to see that there were viable business models beyond the extractive approach he had always championed. I made my way toward him, nodding and smiling at attendees as I passed. "Dad," I said when I reached him, "I'm surprised to see you here." "Peter invited me," he said simply. "He thought I might be interested in seeing what you've accomplished." Of course. Uncle Peter, the eternal optimist, still believed that father and son could find common ground. "And? What do you think?" I tried to keep my tone neutral, though my heart was racing. My father surveyed the scene before answering. "It's more substantial than I expected," he admitted finally. "Your sensor technology seems genuinely innovative, and the integration with the robotics is clever." Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. I waited, sensing there was more. "But," he continued, "Agricor's entry into this market changes everything. You know that, don't you? They can outspend you, outsell you, and eventually out-innovate you. They have resources you can't match as an independent company." And there it was, the criticism I'd been bracing for. "We're not trying to compete with Agricor on all fronts," I said. "We're focused on serving farmers who are fully committed to regenerative practices, not just making incremental improvements to conventional agriculture." "A niche market," he said dismissively. A growing market, I countered. I was expecting Sarah. Is she home? She's at work, I explained. I'm her father-in-law, Robert. The woman's expression changed, a flash of recognition crossing her face. Robert Jensen? Michael's father? I nodded, curious about her reaction. And you are? Angela Martin, she introduced herself. I live next door. Sarah and I are in the same book club. She seemed to hesitate, then added, I'm so sorry about your house. When we heard it was going to be demolished for townhouses, the whole neighborhood was upset. That beautiful Victorian was a landmark on the street. Thank you, I said automatically, then realized what she was saying. Wait, what do you mean, the whole neighborhood was upset? How did you know about my house? Angela looked confused. Michael told everyone you had decided to downsize because the house was too much to maintain after your wife passed. He said you were the one who approached the developer about selling. The lie was so absolute, so contrary to the truth, that for a moment I couldn't speak. Michael hadn't just stolen my home. He had rewritten the narrative of my life to make it appear that I had chosen to give it up. Mr. Jensen, are you all right? Angela's concerned voice broke through my shock. I forced myself to focus on her face, struggling to maintain my composure. Yes, I'm fine. Just surprised to hear that version of events. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean, that version? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger. The neighborhood gossip network would ensure anything I said would spread quickly, potentially complicating an already delicate situation. Yet the urge to correct the record, to reclaim my narrative, was overwhelming. The truth is somewhat different, I said carefully. I didn't choose to sell my home. That decision was made without my full understanding. Angela's expression shifted from confusion to dismay. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. She lowered her voice, though we were alone on the porch. Is that why you're staying here now? Did something happen? It's a family matter, I replied, unwilling to elaborate further. I appreciate your concern, but it's something we're working through privately. She nodded, though I could see the curiosity burning in her eyes. Of course, I didn't mean to pry. I just stopped by to return a book Sarah lent me. She held up a paperback I hadn't noticed before. Could you give it to her? Certainly. I accepted the book, eager to end the conversation before I revealed too much. Well, it was nice meeting you, Mr. Jensen. Please tell Sarah I stopped by. She hesitated, then added, and if you need anything at all, I'm just next door. I thanked her and closed the door, leaning against it heavily once she was gone. The encounter had left me shaken. How many other lies had Michael told? How many people believed I was a doddering old man who couldn't manage his own affairs? The thought was infuriating, humiliating. I had spent my life building a reputation as a reliable, competent person, a business owner who had grown a small electronics repair shop into a successful chain before selling it to fund my retirement, a homeowner who had maintained his property meticulously, a husband who had partnered with his wife to create a stable, loving environment for their family. And now, in the twilight of my life, that reputation was being dismantled by my own son. I placed Angela's book on the hall table and made my way to the living room, sinking into an armchair as the full weight of the situation settled over me. The medical evaluations in Michael's office, the lies to the neighbors, the careful isolation. It was all part of a systematic effort to control the narrative, to justify actions that couldn't be justified any other way. The question that had been nagging at me since yesterday resurfaced with new urgency. Had Michael truly convinced himself I was incapable? Or had he deliberately crafted that fiction to serve his purposes? In some ways, the first option was more bearable. The thought that my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had been proud of, could coldly, calculatingly exploit and deceive me was almost too painful to contemplate. I was still sitting there, lost in these dark thoughts, when the front door opened hours later. Emma bounded in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Grandpa, you didn't forget about ice cream, did you?" I pushed my troubles aside, summoning a smile for my granddaughter. "Of course not. Just let me get my jacket." The afternoon with Emma was a welcome respite from the heaviness of my situation. She chatted animatedly as we walked to the ice cream parlor, filling me in on school gossip, her friends, her classes. I listened with genuine interest, grateful for the window into her life and the chance to strengthen our connection. "So then Ms. Phillips says we have to redo the entire experiment because Riley contaminated the samples," Emma was saying as we settled at a small table with our ice cream. Black cherry for me, something electric blue for her. Which is totally unfair because it wasn't just Riley's fault. The instructions were super vague. "Sometimes teachers make mistakes too," I offered, amused by her outrage. "Have you tried talking to her about it?" Emma rolled her eyes. "Dad says I should just do what the teacher asks and not make waves, that it's good practice for the real world where bosses aren't always fair." Another glimpse into Michael's worldview. Don't challenge authority. Accept injustice. Keep your head down. Was that really what I had taught him? "Your father isn't entirely wrong," I said carefully. "Sometimes in life we do have to pick our battles, but that doesn't mean you should never stand up for what's right or question things that seem unfair." Emma considered this, licking her spoon thoughtfully. "That's what Mom says too. She thinks I should talk to Ms. Phillips and explain why we think the instructions weren't clear." "Your mother is a wise woman," I said with a smile. "Yeah, she's pretty cool," Emma agreed. "Even if she can be super strict sometimes. All good parents have to be strict occasionally," I told her. "It's part of the job description." "Were you strict with Dad when he was my age?" The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Your father was very independent, always pushing boundaries. But I think I was more flexible than he is with you." "How come?" I thought back to Michael's adolescence. Different times, different parenting styles. And every child is unique. What works for one might not work for another. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer, returning her attention to her rapidly melting ice cream. "This was a good idea, Grandpa. We should do stuff like this more often." "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "Maybe we could make it a regular thing while I'm staying with you." "How long will that be?" she asked, curious rather than concerned. Another difficult question. "I'm not sure yet. It depends on how quickly I can find a new place." "You could just stay with us," Emma suggested with the simple generosity of youth. "We have room, well, kind of." I smiled at her enthusiasm. "That's very sweet of you, but I think everyone needs their own space eventually. Including you. I can't imagine you want to sleep on an air mattress in your parents' room forever." "True," she conceded. "But it is kind of like having a sleepover every night." We finished our ice cream and began the walk back, Emma still chattering about school and friends. As we rounded the corner onto their street, I spotted Michael's car in the driveway. "Dad's home early," Emma noted, her pace quickening. "That's weird. He never gets home before dinner." The sight of his car sent a wave of tension through me, the pleasant afternoon with Emma suddenly overshadowed by the reality awaiting us. What new developments had the day brought? Had he made any progress on the accounting I'd demanded? Or was he still scrambling to mitigate the damage? Emma ran ahead, eager to greet her father, while I followed more slowly, steeling myself for whatever might come next. Inside, I found Michael and Sarah in the kitchen, their conversation stopping abruptly when I entered. Emma had already disappeared, upstairs, oblivious to the tension in the air. "How was your day?" Sarah asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Illuminating," I replied, glancing at Michael. I had an interesting conversation with your neighbor, Angela. Michael stiffened, his expression guarded. What did she want? To return a book to Sarah, and to express her sympathy about my decision to sell my house to the developer. The color drained from Michael's face. Dad, don't, I cut him off, my voice harder than I intended. Just don't. I've had enough lies to last a lifetime. Sarah looked between us, confused. What are you talking about? Michael told the neighbors I chose to sell my house, I explained, not taking my eyes off my son. That I approached the developer myself because the house was too much to maintain after Margaret died. Jesus, Michael, Sarah breathed, closing her eyes briefly. Is there anything you didn't lie about? He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the counter in front of him. I also found some interesting documents in your office, I continued, unable to stop now that I had started. Medical evaluations suggesting I might have dementia. Notes about minor memory lapses. Normal moments of forgetfulness that you've been collecting like evidence. Were you building a case against me, Michael? Preparing for the possibility that I might fight back? It wasn't like that, he finally said, his voice hoarse. I was worried about you. After Mom died, you weren't yourself. You weren't eating, weren't sleeping. Sometimes you'd call me in the middle of the night, confused about where she was. I was grieving, I said sharply, not losing my mind. I know that now, he admitted. But at the time, it seemed like more. And yes, part of me was afraid you might make financial decisions that would leave you vulnerable. I thought I was protecting you. By stealing from me? By forging my signature? By lying to everyone, including your own wife? He flinched at each accusation. I made mistakes, terrible ones. I've been trying to figure out how to make it right. And? I pressed. What have you figured out? Michael reached for a folder on the counter and pushed it toward me. This is what you asked for. A full accounting of everything, where the money went, what's left, how I plan to repay it. I stared at the folder but didn't touch it. And the house? It's too late to stop the sale, he said, confirming what he had told us yesterday. But I've been looking at properties that might work for you. There's a small cottage near the park that just came on the market. It needs some work, but it's in your price range and has a nice yard for gardening. The gesture was meaningless compared to what he had taken from me, yet I felt a flicker of hope that he was at least trying. I'd like to see it. I've scheduled a showing for tomorrow afternoon, if that works for you, Michael said, seeming relieved by my response. Fine. I finally picked up the folder, tucking it under my arm. I'll review this tonight. Sarah had been watching our exchange silently, her expression unreadable. Now she spoke up, her voice tired but determined. I think we need to talk to Emma, together. She deserves to know what's going on. Michael looked alarmed. Is that really necessary? She's just a kid. She doesn't need to be burdened with adult problems. She's not a kid, she's a teenager, Sarah corrected him. And she's not stupid. She knows something's wrong. I'd rather she hear the truth from us than piece it together from overheard conversations or neighborhood gossip. I nodded, my agreement. Sarah's right. Emma deserves the truth, or at least a version of it she can understand. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from his childhood. What are we supposed to tell her? That her father is a thief who stole from her grandfather? That's really going to help our family situation. Our family situation is already damaged, Sarah pointed out. And it wasn't your father or me who damaged it. Actions have consequences, Michael. One of those consequences is having to face your daughter. He had no response to that, his shoulders slumping in defeat. We'll talk to her after dinner, Sarah decided. Together. And we'll stick to the facts without demonizing anyone. She gave Michael a pointed look. But we will tell her the truth. The prospect of that conversation hung over the dinner table, like a storm cloud. Emma, sensitive to the mood despite our attempts at normalcy, kept glancing between her parents with increasing concern. "Okay, what's going on?" she finally asked, setting down her fork. "You're all being weird. Did someone die or something?" "No, honey, nothing like that," Sarah assured her. "But we do need to talk to you about something important after dinner." Emma's eyes widened. "Are you guys getting divorced? Is that why Grandpa's staying with us?" "No!" Michael and Sarah spoke in unison, then exchanged a glance I couldn't interpret. "We're not getting divorced," Sarah continued, "but there have been some issues that we need to work through as a family." Emma looked skeptical, but nodded slowly. "Okay, but can we just talk about it now? The suspense is killing me." Sarah looked to Michael, who hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "I suppose there's no point in delaying it." Sarah took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Emma, you know that Grandpa used to live in the big Victorian house where we used to visit him and Grandma, right?" "Yeah, of course. The blue one with the awesome attic." Emma turned to me. "I loved that house. Why did you sell it?" The direct question hung in the air. I looked at Michael, giving him the chance to answer. "That's what we need to talk about," he said, his voice strained. "The truth is, Grandpa didn't actually want to sell the house." Emma's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? Then why did he?" "I sold it," Michael admitted, without properly consulting him. "What?" Emma looked between us, confused. "How can you sell someone else's house without asking them?" "That's where I made a very serious mistake," Michael continued, his voice dropping. "I used a legal document called a power of attorney, which gives one person the right to make decisions for another. I shouldn't have used it that way." "So you sold Grandpa's house without asking him?" Emma's voice rose in disbelief. "Why would you do that?" Michael glanced at Sarah, who nodded, encouragingly. "Remember last year when you were first diagnosed and our insurance wouldn't cover all your treatments?" Emma nodded slowly. "Well, that was part of it. The business was also in trouble, and we were facing some serious financial problems. I made a very wrong decision to use Grandpa's money to solve those problems, thinking I could pay it back before he noticed." Emma's face had gone pale. "You stole from Grandpa to pay for my treatment." "It wasn't just for your treatment," I interjected, not wanting her to feel responsible. "Your father had other financial issues as well." "But that was part of it," Emma insisted, looking directly at Michael. "You stole from Grandpa to pay for my doctors." Michael couldn't meet her eyes. "Yes, that was part of it." Emma pushed her chair back from the table abruptly. "That's why you've been making me feel guilty for every appointment, every prescription, because you were stealing to pay for them." "Emma, no." Sarah reached for her hand, but Emma pulled away. "All those times you said we had to be careful with money and made me feel bad for being sick. It wasn't even your money." Her voice cracked with emotion. "You're a thief and a liar." "Emma," Sarah admonished, but I could see the hurt in my granddaughter's eyes. "It's true," she insisted, tears welling up. "And now Grandpa has to live with us because Dad took his house away. That's really messed up, Dad." Michael looked devastated. "Emma, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but I'm trying to fix them. I never meant to hurt anyone, especially not you or Grandpa." "But you did hurt us," Emma said, standing up. "You hurt everyone." She turned to me, her expression crumpling. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I didn't know." "This isn't your fault, Emma," I told her firmly. "None of this is your responsibility." "I want to go to my room," she said, ignoring my reassurance. "Can I be excused?" Sarah nodded, and Emma fled the table, her footsteps pounding up the stairs. A moment later, we heard her door slam. The three of us sat in silence, the remnants of our dinner forgotten. "That went well," Michael finally said, his attempt at sarcasm falling flat. What did you expect? Sarah asked wearily. That she'd understand and forgive you immediately? She's 14, Michael. She sees things in black and white. And frankly, in this case, she's not wrong. I never meant for her to feel responsible, he said, rubbing his face. The medical bills were just part of it. A small part, really. But you used them as leverage, I pointed out. You made her feel like a burden because of her illness. That might be harder for her to forgive than the financial deception. Michael didn't deny it, which at least suggested he recognized the truth of my words. I should go talk to her, Sarah said, standing up. Let me, I suggested. I think she might be more willing to listen to me right now. Sarah considered this, then nodded. You're probably right. But be gentle with her. She's taking on guilt that isn't hers to carry. I made my way upstairs, pausing outside Emma's temporary quarters, in the small den adjacent to the master bedroom. I knocked softly on the door. Go away, came the muffled response. It's Grandpa, I said. May I come in? A pause, then, okay. I opened the door to find Emma curled up on the air mattress, her face streaked with tears. She looked younger than her 14 years, vulnerable in a way that made my heart ache. Hey there, I said gently, settling on the edge of the mattress. That was a pretty intense conversation downstairs. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I can't believe Dad did that to you. It's so wrong. Yes, it was, I agreed. Your father made some very poor choices, and there will be consequences for those choices. But I need you to understand something important, Emma. None of this, absolutely none of it, is your fault. But he used my medical expenses as an excuse, she said, fresh tears forming. If I wasn't sick— Stop right there, I interrupted firmly. Your illness is not your fault. The expenses related to treating it are not your fault. Your father's decision to handle those expenses by taking what wasn't his? That's entirely on him, not you. She didn't look convinced. I heard you guys arguing last night about the police. I winced, realizing how thin the walls must be. You weren't meant to hear that. Are you going to send Dad to jail? She asked, her voice small. The question pierced my heart. No, Emma, that's not what I want. What I want is for your father to make things right, to understand the harm he's caused, and to rebuild the trust he's broken. Sending him to jail wouldn't accomplish any of that. Promise? She pressed, searching my face for reassurance. I promise, I said solemnly. As long as your father is genuinely working to make amends, I won't involve the authorities. Some of the tension left her body. Good, because even though I'm super mad at him right now, I don't want him to go to jail. That's understandable, I said with a small smile. It's possible to be angry with someone and still love them, you know. I guess, she mumbled, picking at a loose thread on her blanket. I just don't understand why he did it. We're not poor or anything. We have a nice house and go on vacations and stuff. Was it really so bad that he had to steal from you? It was a perceptive question, one I had been asking myself. I think only your father can answer that completely. But sometimes people make bad choices out of fear rather than necessity. Fear of losing what they have, fear of disappointing the people they love, fear of failing in their responsibilities. That doesn't make it okay, Emma insisted. No, it doesn't, I agreed. But understanding why people do the wrong things is part of deciding whether to forgive them. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Are you going to forgive Dad? It was the question I had been wrestling with since discovering Michael's betrayal. Could I forgive him? Should I? I'm working on it, I told her honestly. It won't happen overnight. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But he's my son, and I love him, even when he disappoints me. Emma nodded slowly. I'll try to work on it too. But I'm still really mad at him. You're allowed to be, I assured her. You don't have to pretend otherwise. She uncurled slightly, shifting to sit cross-legged on the mattress. So, what happens now? Are you really going to get a new house? That's the plan. Your father is showing me a property tomorrow that might work. Can I come see it too? She asked, a hint of her usual enthusiasm returning. I could help you decide if it's good enough? I smiled, touched by her offer. I'd like that. If it's okay with your parents and doesn't interfere with school. Tomorrow's Saturday, she reminded me. No school. Then yes, absolutely. I'd value your opinion. She brightened at this, and I was relieved to see a glimmer of the vibrant, confident girl I knew beneath the hurt and confusion. Grandpa? She said after a moment. Thank you for not being mad at me. For what Dad did, I mean. Oh, Emma. I reached out to squeeze her hand. I could never be mad at you for something that wasn't your fault. That's not how love works. She hesitated, then launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around me in a fierce hug. I held her close, this precious granddaughter who somehow managed to be both strong and vulnerable, mature and childlike all at once. I love you, Grandpa, she mumbled against my shoulder. I love you too, kiddo, I replied, my throat tight with emotion. More than you could possibly know. When I returned downstairs, I found Sarah alone in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. How is she? She asked, looking up from her task. Hurt, confused, but resilient, I reported. Where's Michael? In his office, going through financial records, Sarah said, her tone neutral. He's trying to figure out how to expedite paying you back. I nodded, unsure what to say. The situation remained complicated, the path forward unclear. Thank you, Sarah said suddenly, for how you're handling this with Emma, for not turning her against her father, despite everything. That wouldn't serve anyone, I pointed out. Least of all Emma. She needs her father, flawed as he may be. Sarah closed the dishwasher and straightened, wiping her hands on a towel. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about wanting your son back. The man you raised who knew right from wrong. Yes? I want that too, she said softly. I want to believe he's still in there somewhere, beneath all the lies and justifications. That this isn't who he really is. I have to believe that, I told her. Otherwise, what was it all for? The years of teaching him, guiding him, trying to shape him into a good man? Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. When did it all go wrong? When did money become more important than family, than integrity? It was a question I had no answer for. When had my son lost his way? Was it a sudden turn, or a gradual drift, a series of small compromises that eventually led to this massive, ethical breach? I don't know, I admitted. But I have to believe it's not too late for him to find his way back. Sarah nodded, blinking back her tears. I'm going to go check on Emma, then turn in. It's been a long day. For all of us, I agreed. Good night, Sarah. Left alone, I wandered into the living room and settled into an armchair, Michael's financial folder in my lap. I opened it with a sense of trepidation, unsure what I would find. The contents were both better and worse than I had expected. Better, in that Michael had been thorough and transparent about where my money had gone. $120,000 to pay off business debts, $85,000 invested in expanding the business into a new market, which had failed spectacularly, $67,000 for Emma's medical treatments not covered by insurance, $45,000 to pay off their mortgage, and the remainder scattered among various personal and business expenses. Worse, in that the total amount remaining, funds that could be immediately returned to me, was less than a quarter of what had been taken. The repayment plan Michael proposed would take years to complete, even if he sold significant assets, including his boat and a vacation property I hadn't known about. Most troubling of all was the realization that without my house, I was effectively homeless. The allowance Michael had been providing would barely cover rent for a modest apartment, let alone allow me to purchase a new home. The cottage he had mentioned would likely require a substantial mortgage. At my age, with no income beyond Social Security and my depleted savings, I wasn't sure I would qualify. I closed the folder, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. Tomorrow, I would view the cottage with Michael and Emma. Tomorrow, I would confront the reality of my diminished circumstances. Tomorrow, I would continue the painful process of rebuilding what had been broken. But tonight, I was simply an old man, tired and sad, wondering how my life had come to this point. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful spring day that seemed at odds with the heaviness in the house. Breakfast was a subdued affair, with Emma pushing her food around her plate, barely speaking to Michael, who looked like he hadn't slept all night. "What time is the showing?" I asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. 11, Michael replied, glancing at his watch. "We should leave in about half an hour." "I'm coming too," Emma announced, challenging her father to object. To his credit, Michael simply nodded. "That's fine. The more opinions, the better." We drove across town in silence, Michael behind the wheel, me in the passenger seat, and Emma in the back, gazing out the window. As we passed through my old neighborhood, I couldn't help but turn to look at my former home. A large dumpster sat in the driveway, and a crew was already at work, removing windows and stripping the ornate trim that had been one of the house's distinctive features. The sight was physically painful, like watching a beloved pet being put down. That house had been more than just a structure of wood and stone. It had been a repository of memories, a tangible connection to Margaret and the life we had built together. Michael noticed my reaction and had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have taken a different route." "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I needed to see it. To say goodbye." Emma leaned forward from the back seat, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. The simple gesture meant more to me than she could know. We continued on, eventually turning onto a tree-lined street in a more modest neighborhood. The cottage Michael had mentioned sat at the end of a small cul-de-sac partially hidden by mature oak trees. It was a charming structure, with a stone facade and a steep pitched roof that gave it a storybook quality. "It's cute," Emma said, the first hint of enthusiasm I'd heard from her all morning. The real estate agent was waiting on the porch, a middle-aged woman with a practiced smile. "Mr. Jensen? I'm Diane Russell. So nice to meet you. Your son has told me all about your situation." I wondered which version of my situation Michael had shared with her, but I smiled politely and shook her hand. "Thank you for arranging this showing on short notice." "Of course," she said warmly. "Shall we take a look inside?" The cottage was smaller than my previous home, but not uncomfortably so for a single occupant. The main floor consisted of a cozy living room with a stone fireplace, a compact but well-designed kitchen, a formal dining room, and a small study that could serve as a guest bedroom if needed. Upstairs were 2 proper bedrooms and a surprisingly spacious bathroom with both a shower and a clawfoot tub. "The house was built in the 1930s, Diane explained as we toured, but it was completely renovated 5 years ago. New roof, updated, electrical and plumbing, energy-efficient windows." "What about the yard?" I asked, peering out a back window at the garden. "Just under a 1/4 acre, she replied. "Not huge, but plenty of space for gardening, which I understand is a hobby of yours?" I nodded, making a mental note to ask Michael later just how much he had shared about me with this stranger. "The previous owners were garden enthusiasts," Diane continued. "There's a small greenhouse at the back of the property and several established perennial beds." That was a point in the cottage's favor. Margaret had loved gardening, and I had continued the practice after her death, finding solace in the rhythms of planting and harvesting, the simple pleasure of coaxing life from the soil. "What do you think, Grandpa?" Emma asked as we returned to the living room. "Does it feel like home?" It didn't, not yet. But it had potential. I could imagine myself here, rebuilding a life from the fragments that remained. "It has possibilities," I admitted. "The asking price is at the upper end of your budget," Michael said, speaking to me directly for the first time that day. "But I think we could negotiate them down, especially if we point out some of the work that still needs to be done." I raised an eyebrow at his use of "we" and "your budget," as if he hadn't been the one to determine that budget by depleting my resources. But I let it pass, not wanting to air our family issues in front of the real estate agent. "What work do you see needed?" I asked instead. "The kitchen appliances are older models," he pointed out, "and there's some water damage in the upstairs hallway ceiling that might indicate a leak that needs addressing." I had noticed both issues as well. "Valid points for negotiation," I agreed. "Ms. Russell, when was the house last inspected?" The discussion turned to the practical details of purchasing a home, a familiar terrain that provided temporary relief from the emotional complexities of our situation. By the time we left, I had decided to make an offer on the cottage, contingent on a thorough inspection. "I like it," Emma declared as we walked back to the car. "It kind of reminds me of a house from a fairy tale, and the garden is awesome." "It's certainly charming," I agreed, appreciating her enthusiasm, "though it will take some work to make it my own." "We can help," she said confidently. "I'm really good at painting, and Mom knows about decorating and stuff." I smiled at her, warmed by the inclusion of "we" in her plans. Whatever happened with Michael, it seemed my bond with Emma remained strong. As we drove back, Michael cleared his throat nervously. "So, should I tell Diane to move forward with an offer?" I considered the question. The cottage was appealing, and certainly better than continuing to live in Michael and Sarah's home indefinitely. But there was a fundamental issue that needed to be addressed. "How exactly am I supposed to pay for it?" I asked bluntly. "According to your own accounting, you've spent most of my money, and what's left isn't enough for a down payment, let alone purchasing a home outright." Michael's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I've been working on that. I've already listed the boat, and I'm meeting with a realtor on Monday about selling the lake property. Between those two assets, we should be able to raise enough for a substantial down payment. I can co-sign for the mortgage." "At my age, with my limited income?" I pointed out. "Even with a co-signer, no bank is going to approve a 30-year mortgage for a 72-year-old man." "Then I'll take out the mortgage in my name," Michael said, a note of desperation entering his voice. "You can live there, and when it's paid off, I'll transfer the title to you." "So I'd be living in a house that legally belongs to you," I summarized, "with no guarantee of ownership. Forgive me if I'm not enthusiastic about that arrangement, given recent history." Emma shifted uncomfortably in the back seat, clearly distressed by the conversation. Michael seemed to realize how his suggestion had sounded. I wouldn't. "Dad, I'm trying to find a solution here." "I know," I sighed, suddenly weary of the whole situation. "But the fact remains, you've put me in an impossible position. I can't afford to buy a home outright because you took my money. I can't qualify for a mortgage because of my age and income. And I'm unwilling to enter into another financial arrangement where you have control over my living situation." The car fell silent as the full implications of my predicament sank in. We were approaching their house now, the familiar neighborhood, passing by outside the windows. "What if—" Emma began hesitantly from the back seat. "What if Grandpa sued the developer to get his house back?" Michael nearly swerved off the road. "Emma, it's actually not a bad idea," I interrupted, turning to look at my granddaughter with new respect. The sale was fraudulent, after all, based on forged documents and false pretenses. "Dad, be reasonable," Michael pleaded. "The developer has already started demolition. They have plans, permits, contractors, even if you could prove the sale was improper, which would mean admitting what I did to the authorities, it would be tied up in court for years. He was right, of course. Legal recourse would be complicated, expensive, and ultimately might not succeed. Not to mention the public exposure of our family's private troubles. Maybe not the developer then, Emma persisted. But what about suing Dad for the money he took? Then you could buy whatever house you want. Emma! Michael looked genuinely shocked. Are you seriously suggesting your grandfather sue me? Why not? She challenged, a hint of her earlier anger returning. You stole from him. People get sued for stealing. It's a bit more complicated than that, Emma, I said gently. Legal action within families rarely solves the underlying problems, and it tends to create new ones. She subsided, though I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. Her suggestion, though impulsive, showed a strong sense of justice and loyalty to me that I found touching. We pulled into the driveway, and Michael turned off the engine but made no move to get out of the car. Instead, he gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I'll fix this, he said, his voice quiet but determined. I don't know exactly how yet, but I will make this right. I studied my son's profile, searching for signs of the boy I had raised, the man I had been proud of. There was something in his expression. A resolve, perhaps, or simply the weight of accountability finally settling on his shoulders, that gave me the first glimmer of hope since this ordeal began. I'm going inside, Emma announced, breaking the moment. She hesitated, then touched my shoulder again. I still think the cottage was nice, Grandpa. After she left, Michael and I sat in silence for a long moment. The car felt smaller somehow, the space between us charged with unspoken words. Why didn't you just ask me? I finally said, the question that had been burning inside me for months. If you were in trouble, if you needed help with Emma's medical bills, with the business, why didn't you come to me? Michael's hands fell, from the steering wheel into his lap. Pride, he admitted, the word barely audible. Stupid, foolish pride. I didn't want you to see me failing. Failing? I echoed, genuinely puzzled. Michael, asking for help isn't failing. It's what family is for. Not in your world, he said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. You never asked for help. Not once in my entire life. You built your business from nothing, provided for all of us, took care of Mom when she got sick, handled everything on your own. You were always so self-sufficient. I was startled by his perception. Is that how you saw me? As some kind of Superman who never needed anyone? He shrugged. Wasn't it true? You were always the strong one, the provider, the problem solver. Even after Mom died, you grieved, but you managed. You kept going. Oh, Michael. I shook my head, saddened by this distorted image he had of me.